Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us. My name is Greig. I'll be your host for this afternoon's webinar, one of the series we've been having throughout the past 3 years with TMSG, and we'll continue it in 2024. For our first session today, what we're going to look at is building customer engagement and the importance of it and the travesties when we get it wrong at times. Within each of the months, we'll be presenting a particular theme or a particular topic, and I'll highlight what the coming months are at the end of today's webinar. We want to try and tap into individuals, leaders, and managers who find these themes of interest, or if they're pertinent to them, of high relevance for them at the moment, something they're trying to develop. And today's we're going to dive, as I said, into customer engagement. For those of us involved in sales or in coaching sales, it's probably the bread and butter of what we'll need to be doing, along with communication and effectively engaging with customers throughout. So let's dive into today. I'll take you through the slide deck so you know how it'll flow. We'll have a bit of a slide deck, and I'll be discussing examples where practical for each of these, but trying to leave you with some key points that you can utilise and share within the session. The process we tend to follow within our webinars is a 4-step process. So we look at the topic and say, what is it? Why is it important? What happens when we get it wrong? And finally, how do we get it right? So we'll have a look at each of these here, and hopefully you'll find some takeaways and some snippets that you can apply in your particular situation, either an individual, as a team, a company, or organisation. So in terms of what is customer engagement, we probably want to look at a couple of things, and it's going to be more than just the actual experience. Many people are familiar with what we talk about customer service and the customer experience or the user experience, but in this instance, it begins prior to actual engagement with the customer, before the actual direct engagement, which many people are familiar with in the world of sales, and it lingers beyond the interaction with the customer. So an effective customer engagement strategy will look at all the interactions. It'll look at activities and experiences which will directly impact upon the consumer or the end user and how they react to you as an individual, the products, the services, and or the brand. We've just had a great example of this within Australia, taking place in Melbourne, the Australian Open, and Karen Clydesdale, the head of customer experience for Tennis Australia, described this as from the very first point when a customer might get onto the app to look at what's on for the day, ticketing, facilities, etc., through to when they walk through the gates. That should also align as well. And then afterwards, was there congruence between what they expected, what they were told to expect, and what they experienced? So this all sort of encompasses it really well. And I think there's a team at Tennis Australia just had 1 million people through the gates over the period of the event. Would probably be some of the best examples of that at the moment. Now, why is it important for us? I think what we have to realise now is there's this competitive edge. There always has been a competitive edge, but now options are much broader and much wider for the customer. So, and one of the concerns for this, and the concerns for everybody is, and researchers now are pointing this out as well, in Australia, the UK, and the US, so it's largely been pointed out and reinforced, that this cost of living pressure that's being put on the individual has caused them to start looking beyond it more and more options, rather than just their preferred option. And what might have been us historically. So your company might have been a preferred option. You might have been a preferred supplier. And as much as that is fantastic, there's one thing, this cost of pressure that's putting unnecessary and undue pressure, hence the term, on the individual. And so they are starting to look broader for that. And in looking broader, we need to try and make sure we maintain market share. The second point there is a positive customer experience has been known to increase the spend of the customer itself. So if there's a positive engagement with the customer and they have a positive experience with your brand or you as an individual, that builds loyalty. But not only loyalty, it ends up in what we call return to wallet. It actually ends up in the company's profits because this loyalty is built up. So that's another reason why it's important. And thirdly, for those people looking to expand their enterprise, whether you be as an individual trader or, as I said, a company or in an organization, if you can develop, if and when you develop a successful customer engagement strategy, that can then be scaled and replicated in other regions, or replicated to allow you to scale. So what we suggest here is that in producing or designing a customer experience and a customer engagement strategy, a process whereby individuals can get the maximum out of it, you're more likely to be able to scale and grow your business. And if you can scale and grow your business and you replicate and you copy the same methodology, and this is being used, in companies around the world constantly, that is, how can we make sure we flow from store to location, or individual sales rep to individual sales rep? Another huge advantage of it. So let's look thirdly at how we get it wrong before we look at some examples of how to get it right. One negative experience will lead to loss of loyalty, and this loss of loyalty becomes lost revenue and therefore decreased potential for referrals or advocacy. Advocacy is what we refer to as word of mouth. It's people doing your advertising for you because they become raving fans. So this lost opportunity becomes loyalty that's not rewarded. And this loyalty doesn't have to have existed before. You need to build the loyalty with your first engagement with the first customer. Now, whether you be transactional or consultative in your sales process or your engagement with customers, this is still important for us. Secondly, the ignorance of the consumer's perspective and lack of listening to what the customer's needs are means we can sometimes present the wrong solution. Presenting the wrong solution means we're getting this customer engagement and customer experience wrong. And thirdly, we need to aim to move the customer and make it a positive engagement for them. When customers aren't moved by the experience, they'll consider it transactional. That is, they don't really care who they buy from. It's forgotten the moment they've made the purchase or the engagement, and therefore you've lost your point of difference. So this is where we can get it wrong. So now let's look at, now we've looked at what it is, why it's important, where we can get it wrong. The next logical progression is, how do we get it right? And we're going to look at 5 steps here today on how can we get customer engagement right. How can we improve upon that which is already existing, or how can we design a customer engagement process that is resilient and robust and stands up in the face of the consumer experience, so much so that they want to engage again. So firstly, we're going to look at humanising the experience and the power of story. Secondly, the role of active listening. Thirdly, we're going to look at the role of empathy. And then how can you build a customer-centric culture and make it a culture so that it's gone from what we call from the wall to the floor. It's nice to have the mottos there, but other staff and other individuals actually living it. And lastly, discretionary efforts, what many individuals and consumers in this instance consider to be the point of difference between company A and company B. So in terms of the power of story, let me introduce you to a woman here, some of you may be familiar with. Her name's Anita Roddick. Anita Roddick was the founder of The Body Shop, and many people are familiar with her products and her brands, but they're not familiar with the story behind it. And Anita Roddick, her real drive and her real passion was to remove animal testing from the personal product use and fragrances and cosmetics that were being, where animals were being tested and used as the, pardon the pun, the guinea pigs for these products there. Now, in this instance, what people know is that they often know, The Body Shop for their bath bombs and their moisturizer, but do they know what they're really standing for? And the thing is, your message counts more than your product sometimes. And in doing, yes, she was renowned for her awesome products and shops worldwide, but it was her stance against animal testing. And this was the story behind it in many ways. Anita Roddick also had a very powerful motto for her staff, that passion persuades. And it became a company motto, company statement, where people would utilize the power of persuasion by being passionate about what they were doing. And she was definitely a classic example of that. So for us, we might say, well, what's your story? What's your personal story? We all have a personal story, but is there a company story? Is there a brand story? Because when we humanize this, it builds into the customer engagement strategy. And when we build it in, it strengthens it. Without the story, it takes away the humanization of it. And without the humanization, the engagement can be somewhat blasé and can be somewhat and less personalized. The second tip we gave in how to get it right was what we call active listening. Now, first thing to understand, there is active listening. Listening is hearing is a sense. Listening is a skill. And the differentiation between the two is extremely important. There are courses for public speaking. I'm yet to come across a course for public listening. Yet we listen 65% of the time, if not more for a lot of us too. If you're more introverted, it'd be even higher again. So how can we get better at this active listening? Active listening is when the customer feels like they're being heard, and that's extremely important for us. So how can we help the customer feel like they're being heard, they're being understood, we empathize with them as well? So 5 tips we want to share today is, and none of them are extremely complex to grasp. One, focusing on the other person, well, making the other person the focus of your attention. And it's referred to as being present. We often say be present. So try and push all other interruptions aside and really focus on the person you're engaging with, in this case, the prospect or the customer. Secondly, avoid judgment. When we're avoiding judgment, what we're doing is we're not trying to prejudge. You always think of the scene from Pretty Woman, and when she was dressed, when the actress was dressed in casual attire and she just went into a store to buy something, she was dismissed, and goes back the next day with all the great gear on and the certain shopping bags from certain brands, and she gets more attention. This judgment that we can prejudge and we can be overly assumptive, and we need to watch out for this judgment. So we need to really listen and sort of stand in our own truth and let the other person speak their mind too. Thirdly, using body language. The elements of body language, we call it non-verbal communication. There's 2 elements we want to look at in being a better active listener and hence building our customer engagement. One is being able to read the customer or the prospect's body language or their non-verbals, being able to read them, read the situation, read the room. So what is it they're conveying? What are the messages they're sending? Are they comfortable around you? Are they uncomfortable? Are they guarded? Are they open? So what is it that might be there? Is there something that they might be holding back? Being able to read that is extremely important. The reading of it's one part. The second part is while they're speaking, because this is active listening, while the customer or the prospect is speaking, we encourage people to be able to let the person speak, but let them know, we call them affirmations, let them know they're being heard by subtle nods along the way. Sometimes we can put in the verbal, go on. Oh, it sounds challenging. They're verbal, but the non-verbals, little subtle movements we can make, or subtle gestures we can often make, or facial expressions to let the customer know that we're listening to them and we haven't lost any attention and we are still present. Fourthly, avoid interrupting. All right, it's not about us, it's about them. So it's about the customer. So we want to let the customers speak what it is they're saying. Avoid waiting for them to finish so you can speak. So seek first to understand before being understood. And to do that, we really need to listen. And lastly, respect silence. There's a tendency in sales where the salesperson will often feel the need to fill the silence. And they don't like the silence because they think the customer is, weighing up objections or reluctancies or hesitations or doubt. Sometimes to respect the silence and give the customer space to think or to percolate, as we say, to let things process in their mind. So one tip we can give you for what we call active listening, and to make sure you're really present and paying attention when the customer is speaking or sharing their thoughts, is a strategy called the last 3 words. The last 3 words encourages us to think and pay attention to all that the customer is saying. And when they finally conclude their last statement, We give a bit of time, but we begin our response with their last 3 or 5 words. For example, if they finish and said, well, that's why I've come into the store today. Okay, why you've come into the store today? Tremendous. Let me show you a good reason for coming in, because today happens to be, and on we go. Show them that they were listening. It's astounding the impact it can have, the last 3 to 5 words. The astounding impact it have, because so often we don't feel listened to. So that's what we refer to as active listening. The other tip we had was taking it from the customer's perspective, or being empathetic, right? Or empathic is probably a better way of putting it. So being more empathic with the customer. We say this looking through the lens of the customer. The advantage we all have is that we are all customers first. In all of our coaching programs, whether in sales or in leadership, in management or in train the trainer and customer service excellence, we always encourage either the leader or the salesperson or the coach to flip the lens and see it from their audience's view, the customer's view, someone else's view, just to change the lens, hence this diagram today. So we want the customer to feel they're being heard. Let them know you care, and by understanding and empathizing with their situation, that by itself can be a real point of difference for you. Another way to do this for those of you who are in sales, especially if you're in retail sales or if you're in face-to-face sales of some kind, is to be a mystery shopper, to go in as a customer and to see how you're treated in your organization as a customer and what could be improved upon that. The fourth element for us today to look at of improving our engagement with customers is what we call building a customer-centric culture, right? So a customer-centric culture. And this customer-centric culture is, how can we put the customer at the core of all that we do? How can we put the customer in the center of the decision-making? Jeff Bezos, the famous founder of Amazon, embellished this and took it to a new level where within his board meetings, there was typically 12 people in a board meeting. And it's quite a well-known story now, but it's based on reality, in that Jeff Bezos set up a 13th chair in the boardroom while they were having this board meeting, making decisions for how they will engage with their customers, what they will charge for shipping, how long it will take, how they will communicate with customers, as well as the 12 board members. The 13th chair was vacant. And one of the board members said, Jeff, what's the 13th chair for? He said, that's for the customer. And it was a vacant chair, but each time they made a decision that was going to affect a customer, they would sort of default and defer to, what would the customer say about this? So if they were going to decrease the price, but it would increase the length of shipping time, what would the customer say? Or vice versa, if they're going to decrease the shipping time, but put the price up, what would the customer say? Or we can make shipping free, but people pay a premium per month. What would the customer say? So this 13th chair methodology is a reminder for us sometimes to be customer-centric. And we look at elements, as you can see in this Venn diagram here. We have utilizing feedback that we get from customers. So it can be direct or indirect feedback from the direct exchange or later on. And we look at that to improve the business interactions. We look at how do we understand customers and their needs? Are we being overly assumptive in that? And third part of it, how can we design the experience? Rather than by being default, like how will this exchange go? How can we make it work effectively, and how can we design it so it works effectively? So put some design within it. In each of those instances, it's putting the customer at the front of mind, right? We call that a customer-centric approach. And that's the fourth element in building an effective customer engagement strategy. The fifth element is probably the element that's going to be your personal point of difference, and it can be a corporate point of difference, and can be a brand point of difference. And that is what we call DE, or discretionary effort. This simple diagram here, you'll see performance on the vertical, time on the horizontal. We have what many people would do, and that is, what's the minimum required of me as an employee or as a team member? What's the minimum expectation? And that's what we call the have to do curve. That's just meeting the minimum requirements. Some of us might remember in school asking the teacher what the pass mark was, and if they said it was 51%, then there'd be some students who were just going for that to get 51 or 52% because it was just enough to get by. No judgment on that, but it doesn't help them stand out, in a competitive crowd, in a competitive world. The above the have to do curve, we have the want to do curve, or the get to do curve. And the difference between the two is what we call discretionary effort. Discretionary effort is the effort we make above the minimum requirements, and we do it at our own discretion. In the world of customer engagement, we do it because it'll benefit the business and or the customer. It's not about benefiting us, right? In the customer world, there are things we do with discretionary effort that'll benefit us. A lot of us do extra professional development, we'll do extra reading, extra workouts that'll benefit us. We don't have to, but we get to and we choose to. And the discretionary effort gets noticed either by us and or others. So in the business world or in the consumer-centric world, the little things that you can do that can make a difference there. So we sometimes refer to these as above and beyond, going above and beyond, right? Doing the extra bits there. There's an awesome book out at the moment called Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidera, who recently was just named the #1 restaurant in the world. 11 Madison Avenue is the restaurant. And it's all the little efforts, the tiny little efforts, empowering his staff to become better and better and empowering them to work autonomously wherever needed as well. So we call that above and beyond. Some of us know it as surprise and delight is another term, or others know it as extra miling. Each of these are examples of discretionary effort. It's a point of difference, a personal point of difference, a company point of difference, or a brand point of difference. And so there are the 5 there we have. So here's a challenge to us here, or an activity you can involve, as in what can I take from this and how can I build it in to what I'm doing either with myself individually, my team, or my organization. That is, within your team or business, brainstorm what you believe adds value to a customer experience. So what do you believe adds value? Remember, we're customers first. So what do you and your team believe adds value as a customer? And it could be niceties such as using people's names. It could be putting them on the mailing list, letting them know VIP nights, letting them know special deals that are coming up if you're in the retail space, etc. So these, what are the things that you could do that could add value to the customer experience? And brainstorm these out. Just list them. Remember, in a brainstorm, there's no rules. Just list them all. Be wild and ambitious in this. And then secondly, of those, which are the most popular? So you could go back and say, oh, which ones, there'll be some that you could implement with minimal resistance, minimal effort, and that actually has a good impact. So which are the ones could you build in to your customer engagement or your customer strategy or process almost immediately? So it's an activity for us to finish with today when we talk about building consumer engagement. How do we get the most out of the engagement experience for the customer so that you, as an individual, as a team, or as a corporation, or as a brand, become the brand, individual, or company of choice because of the customer engagement and the experience that's offered from you? So that's what we wanted to share today. And hopefully there's a little takeaway there for you again with the activity. Each of our webinars, we aim to try and keep them to bite size for you and trying to make them digestible and something that's actionable. Coming up for you, just so you're aware, we'll be producing one of these a month, and they'll be available on our website, themarketingsalesgroup.com, as our latest webinar release. And for our public webinars, they're also available to the public viewing as well, as these are. In the coming 3 months, what you can expect from the webinars that are arriving is navigating change, developing a winning team, and what makes a great leader. Right. So they're the ones we're coming up in the 3 months. Thanks for joining us today. And we look forward to engaging with you. Remember, this is being recorded. Will be put on the website for later viewing. If there's anything you want to, please share it with them. And any feedback, always welcome. Thanks, everyone. And thanks for your time this afternoon.